Trump's meeting with Zelensky was short but described as substantive. Do you see a shift in the U.S. policy towards Ukraine after months of tensions?
There's a couple of things going on. First of all, the meeting itself was an opportunity for President Zelensky to outmaneuver President Trump. Uh, and part of it was a continuity of a strategy. The fact that this entire time he was preserving critical leverage by refusing to put the minerals deal before Ukrainian parliament, which allowed for constant renegotiation, adaptation, and even if revocation if needed. Trump, on the other hand, was fixated on delivering wins on the global stage, which made him vulnerable to symbolic victories, which masked deeper concessions. And this pivotal meeting at Vatican was an opportunity to exploit the fact that Trump is far more comfortable with with declaring these symbolic victories on in front of public than in dealing with private meetings. To some extent, Trump um, was caught off guard. He likes appearing magnanimous in high profile situations. In reality, it wasn't a big diplomatic change. What happened was a tactical maneuver. Um, by engaging in public, Trump was allowed to score an image win, portraying himself as an indispensable peacemaker who could mend a fractured relationship and nudge Ukraine towards stability. But privately, he gave no commitments. Instead, he pressed for progress on the minerals deals, encouraged Ukraine to take realistic steps on peace, a phrase that Kyiv interpreted as a veiled push towards concessions with Moscow. Nevertheless, the power dynamics have shifted. Zelensky by now is more experienced in navigating Trump's personal style as well as administration preference for optics over substance. And he was no longer a reactive partner. He knew Trump's appetite for headlines, especially as the US was pulling away from frontline diplomatic mediation in the peace process. With Washington stepping back formally from the talks and leaving a vacuum to other countries, including Europe, this was an opportunity to exploit this meeting um, in a way that worked for both parties. Zelensky used the moment to reset the tone without accusations or ultimatums, but with a soft pitch for reviving the diplomatic track and opening new channels for military and economic cooperation. He, at the meeting, suggested to Trump that Ukraine was now ready to consider reasonable peace proposals, deliberately using ambiguous language designed to appease Trump's demand for flexibility while protecting Ukraine's red lines. And Trump interpreted exactly as Zelensky hoped he would. If you see the announcements that followed the meeting, Trump went to Putin claiming that Ukraine seemed apparently ready for territorial concessions without clarifying where and how exactly. But Putin refused to cooperate on even a temporary ceasefire, which angered the United States. Hoped that it was finally a time for a breakthrough, given that Ukraine seemed open and more flexible based on the language. Then, when the minerals deals was signed, that was a shift in tone again.
Right. Let me take it from this point, Ms. Tsukerman, and the U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. The U.S.-Ukraine mineral deals gives Washington much of the access to the critical resources. Now, how much of this deal is about economic opportunities versus strategic competition with Russia, and how do you think Russia's response would be towards that?
Well, Russia has already shown a great deal of concern. The economic opportunities for now are scarce because most of those minerals are located in areas occupied by Russia, and until they are deoccupied, US will have no realistic access to them. But it is a big political point for both the United States and Ukraine. For the United States, it gives that symbolic diplomatic victory that Trump was craving. And it does not oblige the US to any security guarantees, so US is no more involved in the conflict than it was prior to the signing of the deal. But on the other hand, the latest version of the deal, which, as I underscore, was not ratified by Ukrainian parliament and therefore could be revoked or amended at any point, has stepped away from the extreme demands that Trump has made during his disastrous meeting with Zelensky and in months that followed. But it's actually a much bigger win for Ukraine than it is for the United States. First of all, for practical reasons, the United States now lifted some of the sanctions imposed earlier and allowed Ukraine to purchase advanced weapons for cash. Second, it underscored U.S. commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty, at least symbolically, which is a strategic communication to Russia, and that is why Russia was alarmed. It was previously
right, Ms. Zuckerman, but still there is also the Russian response, and the Kremlin has said that the minerals deal undermines the peace process. Now, how do you see it's affecting the talks?
I mean, honestly, it's just an excuse for Russia. Russia has previously tried to negotiate the same minerals deals as an occupying power of those territories, but U.S. was not really budging even then. Even at its most pro-Russian shift, it didn't sign off on the deal that Russia was offering. So, from a practical standpoint, it was really never going to be Russia's leverage in the negotiations. From a more theoretical standpoint, Russia keeps finding justifications and excuses to attack civilians